At precisely 8:42 a.m., Hope noticed the glaring error for the fifth time. Line 46B, vendor disbursement totals, inflated by 7,930 This wasn't a random typo, nor a simple input mistake. It was the same suspicious rounding she'd flagged for 3 consecutive quarters. And yet, there it was again, bold as brass and just as unapologetic. Her small office, deep within the corporate labyrinth, smelled faintly of stale coffee and unaddressed issues. A flickering fluorescent light hummed overhead, giving the entire space the unsettling ambiance of a forgotten utility closet. Hope sipped her coffee, lukewarm, unpleasantly bitter, and stubbornly decaf, thanks to HR's latest wellness initiative. She scrolled through the intricate spreadsheet like a digital detective meticulously examining a crime scene. This wasn't merely shoddy accounting. This was deliberate. Numbers were being subtly adjusted in ways that consistently made the company appear just a little more profitable, just a little more efficient than the true figures would allow. And this was on federal defense contracts, no less. She'd dedicated enough years to corporate oversight to recognize a deliberate manipulation, and this one reeked of expensive cologne and questionable ethics. But did it truly matter? She could already hear Arthur's condescending voice echoing in her mind. Hope, you fret too much. That's precisely what makes you so effective. Isn't it? He always delivered it with that unsettlingly smooth, practiced grin, the kind that screamed hidden agendas and backroom deals. Still, she wasn't about to let this slide. She pulled up her standard memo template, titled it Project Delta 7, Reporting Discrepancies, Q2, and began typing. No dramatics, no direct accusations, just concise language, precise bullet points, clear date references, and attached supporting documentation. It was the kind of meticulous report you compile when you know they're likely to ignore it, but you still need it on official record. Hope then printed the memo. Yes, physically printed. She didn't trust Arthur not to accidentally delete digital correspondence. She slid the pages into a clear plastic folder. She walked the carpeted hallway, past the framed motivational posters about integrity and teamwork, both of which received her silent, cynical glance every time she passed. She knocked twice on Arthur's imposing office door and entered without waiting for an invitation. Arthur was on his sleek Bluetooth headset, gesturing expansively at nothing in particular, leaning back in a chair that likely cost more than her entire annual bonus. He gave her a dismissive finger wave. He ended his call with a terse circle back Tuesday, then turned to her as if she'd just interrupted his private meditation. Hope, to what do I owe this distinct pleasure? He grinned. She held up the folder. Q2 reports. The discrepancy remains. Page 7, vendor totals. I recommend we issue a corrected submission before the audit season. It's not a yes. He cut her off, flipping open the folder with exaggerated boredom. He didn't even bother to read it. You and your legendary eye for the minutiae. Hope didn't respond. She simply waited. He offered a smile like a man whose teeth had never known an honest day's labor. We'll have my team look at it. You know how these systems can glitch. It's not a system glitch, she stated flatly. It's human input. Consistent patterns over time. Patterns that if they ever got scrutinized. Hope? He chuckled, as if she were a child rambling. Relax. You always anticipate the worst. That's precisely why we appreciate you. That word, appreciate, dripped from his tongue like oil, glistening in a puddle. He waved the folder at her as if it were an amusing piece of fan fiction, then carelessly tossed it onto a precarious pile of unopened mail. She turned to leave, her heart thumping, not from fear, but from the sharp, agonizing realization that she had just offered a life raft to a man who preferred to drown in ill-gotten gains. Behind her, she heard him call out, "Don't worry, we'll be perfectly fine without your obsessive attention to detail." It wasn't the words that struck her. It was the tone. That smirking, dismissive finality. In that precise moment, Hope understood something with the stark clarity of a lightning strike. He truly believed this was over. He believed she would simply walk out of here with her little folder and quietly disappear. But Hope had spent 15 years being the woman who meticulously read the fine print no one else bothered with. The only difference today, she was finally going to use it. The summons arrived at 10:14 a.m., less than 2 hours after she had handed him the memo. "Arthur wants to see you," chirped Brenda from HR, her voice as artificially sweet as the air freshener that perpetually failed to mask whatever unidentifiable odor lingered in the break room microwave. Hope knew before she even stood up. The walk to his opulent office felt like a solemn funeral procession, except the corpse was still breathing and had a rather generous retirement plan. She passed the open-plan sales floor. Young men in ill-fitting suits playfully tossing stress balls. Young women too naive to realize that wearing heels here often meant they'd be designated as scapegoats within 6 fiscal quarters. None of them looked up. They never did. Mr. Davies's office door stood conspicuously open, wide enough to feel performative. Inside, the man himself was seated behind his polished walnut desk, which gleamed as if it had been buffed by angels. The blinds were tilted just so, allowing the morning light to glint off his expensive watch. His hair was perfectly coiffed in that unnerving, helmet-like style that only occurs when vanity completely overrides logic. "Hope!" he boomed, extending his arms as if she were walking into a surprise party, not her own professional demise. "Do have a seat." She complied, spine rigidly straight, hands calmly folded in her lap. Her folder, containing the critical memo, still rested in the inbox tray on his credenza, utterly untouched. Of course it was. He opened a pristine manila envelope, then slid a stack of papers across the desk toward her, as if he were dealing a hand of cards. So, after a great deal of strategic soul-searching, and I mean a great deal, we've decided to realign a few roles. Streamline, maximize efficiency. You know the drill. Hope blinked. "You're terminating me?" Arthur grinned as if it were all a harmless practical joke. "I prefer the term, liberating your potential. Look, you're incredibly talented. No one's denying that. But let's be honest, compliance isn't exactly where the action is. We need more agile thinkers, people who can pivot, not just catalog risks all day." She stared at the papers. Her name was printed prominently at the top. It was a severance package. 1 week's pay for every year of service. A pittance, meticulously wrapped in legal jargon. There was even a small company-branded pen clipped to the folder, as if that somehow elevated the dismissal to a matter of class. Hope's throat tightened, but her voice remained perfectly level. "Because I filed a report this morning?" Arthur leaned back in his plush chair and laughed. A full, open-mouthed, teeth-baring laugh, the kind that filled the room like a suffocating cloud. "Hope, no. Come on, you're not being punished." This was already in motion. "It's got absolutely nothing to do with your memo. Seriously, you think we make executive decisions based on a mere spreadsheet? Based on a pattern of fraud in a federally funded contract?" She corrected. That made him pause, just for a fleeting second. Then he shook his head, still amused. "Always so dramatic. This is why compliance people never become CEOs. You perceive danger in shadows, patterns in coffee stains." He then picked up his expensive, silver-plated pen, a supposed gift from the board, signed the final page as if it were a greeting card, clicked the pen shut, and slid it towards her with that infuriating salesman wink. "Best of luck, Hope. I truly mean it. Perhaps now you'll discover a place that genuinely appreciates your unique talent for nitpicking." There it was, that word again, nitpicking. As if ethics were mere dandruff. as if 15 years of diligently ensuring federal code compliance was merely the work of a hobbyist with a magnifying glass. She took the folder. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. But his laughter clung to the air, following her like a persistent static charge. That mocking sound would pursue her throughout the day, like an irritating song stuck in her head. And later, when the inexorable wheels of federal justice began to turn, and Arthur found himself unceremoniously freezing his accounts for a judge instead of indulging his extravagant whims, she would recall that laugh not as a symbol of his fleeting power, but as a precise timestamp. The last moment he ever held the upper hand. The cardboard box they provided her was woefully inadequate for 15 years of her professional life. She crammed it full anyway. Photos, her ancient, reliable stapler, the good one that never jammed, 2 chipped mugs, and a plant that was half dead and half spite. Her hands trembled at first, but it wasn't sadness anymore. It was something quieter, heavier, like freshly poured concrete setting around her rib cage. Hope's desk was already being subtly eyed by someone in HR. A younger woman, feigning casual curiosity, loitered nearby, pretending to organize printer paper. From the corner of her eye, Hope could see her former colleagues, people she'd shared birthday cake with, exchanged donuts during audits, suddenly become masters of avoidance. No eye contact, no genuine goodbyes, just a few limp, sorry to see you goes offered like expired coupons no one intended to redeem. When she reached under her monitor stand and retrieved the black moleskin notebooks, the ones she had never dared to sync to company drives, she didn't care who noticed. Their pages were filled with meticulous handwritten notes, margin scribbles, precise dates, intricate invoice numbers, and tiny red flags she'd observed for years but never dared to connect until now. She carefully slid them into the box like sacred relics, because to her, they were. She walked the corridor one last time, her heels clicking like sharp punctuation marks in an unfinished sentence. The silence was brutal. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, but her world was dissolving into an indistinguishable noise she was no longer a part of. She stepped outside, and there he was. Mr. Arthur Davies, in the parking lot, leaning casually on the hood of his brand-new sports car, all smug chrome and midlife crisis. He was laughing boisterously with 2 other executives, his sunglasses pushed up onto his forehead as if he were posing for a luxury yacht catalog. Hope stopped midway between the imposing building and her humble car with the cracked bumper. She watched him gesture proudly toward the car's engine, as if it had single-handedly cured a major illness. One of the executives, a man from procurement who once innocently asked if compliance was merely fancy spell check, tossed out a joke that made Arthur throw his head back and laugh again. That same laugh. Her fingers clenched the edge of the cardboard box so tightly it creaked under the pressure. It hit her like a lightning bolt directly to the spine. This man had brazenly taken her job, her dignity, her future, and traded it all for horsepower and high fives. He had callously cut her loose, not because she was wrong, but simply because she was an inconvenient obstacle. He genuinely believed that was the end of it, that she would quietly go home, grieve, and eventually move on. Instead, Hope stood perfectly still in the muggy spring air and meticulously memorized the sight of him, the impeccably tailored blazer, the cocky stance, the utterly stupid grin. Then she opened her trunk, placed the box gently inside, slid behind the wheel, and took a deep, steady breath. Not a single tear, not one. She glanced down at the passenger seat. Her backup flash drive rested in the cup holder, precisely where she'd left it last week, containing full copies of every single compliance report she'd ever filed. Arthur hadn't fired her. He had unwittingly unshackled her. And he was about to discover precisely what a nitpicker could accomplish with a federal statute, an undeniable paper trail, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The diner was called Lou's Place, though there was no Lou, just a perpetually bitter woman named Rita, who looked as if she'd smoked through both of her tumultuous marriages and now took orders as if each one were a personal affront. Hope slid into the corner booth like a specter, returning to the scene of her own professional demise. The worn vinyl seat hissed under her weight. She dropped her coat beside her and carefully pulled the cardboard box onto the table. Her meticulously kept notebooks emerged first, followed by her phone, charger, and a ballpoint pen so worn down that the logo was just a greasy smudge. Rita brought her a mug of coffee that tasted suspiciously like it had been filtered through an old sock and pure resentment. "You want a menu?" Hope shook her head. "Just keep the coffee coming." "Sure," Rita muttered, then added, "Hope whatever he did, he regrets it." Hope didn't reply. Not yet. She plugged in her phone and opened her cloud backups. Every single compliance report she'd ever filed was there. Every memo, every flagged entry. Her fingers moved swiftly, as if muscle memory had taken over. The gnawing grief, the crushing humiliation, the dull ache in her chest, all gone, packed away in some mental crawl space. What remained was cold calculation, relentless pattern recognition, and an unshakable purpose. By the time she reached her second refill, she had a concise list of transactions that simply didn't make sense, unless someone deliberately intended for them not to make sense. Vendors billed for items never demonstrably received, inflated labor hours on contracts that had already been officially closed, and always the same accounts signed off by the same 3 names. But this wasn't just about spreadsheets anymore. She opened her browser and precisely typed, "Federal Whistleblower Report Fraud, Government Contract Portal." Bureaucracy loved convoluted names. Fortunately, Hope had worked in the very belly of it for years. She knew precisely where to look. The very contract Arthur had flaunted so proudly, Contract H-7A4B, fell squarely under the jurisdiction of the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Energy. She followed link after link after link until she finally landed on the golden portal. Report, fraud, waste, or abuse. Office of the Inspector General. She stared at the page for a long, quiet moment, allowing the immense gravity of her actions to settle upon her. Then she began to read, carefully, thoroughly. That's when she found it. Section 132.4, Subpart C, Qui Tam Protections. It was everything. Under the False Claims Act, individuals who meticulously reported fraud involving federal funds could not only remain anonymous, they could actually initiate a civil action on behalf of the government and, even more astonishingly, receive a percentage of any recovered damages. Her coffee had long since gone cold. She drank it anyway. Hope reached for her notebook and flipped to the page she'd labeled Redundant Anomalies. She started a new column beside each entry. Contract ID, dollar variance, signatory, frequency. She cross-referenced them with the internal audit calendar and highlighted every single transaction that fell just outside of the established review scope windows. None of it was dramatic. That's precisely what made it so devastatingly effective. Quiet, intentional shifts in timing, just enough to meticulously escape casual scrutiny. She drafted her outline the same way she used to compose audit rebuttals. Clean, meticulously bullet-pointed, utterly emotionless, precise dates, stark figures, undeniable attached files. Her eyes stung from staring at the screen for so long. But she didn't stop. She wasn't merely building a case. She was constructing a meticulously woven noose. Rita returned with a fresh pot of coffee and paused, her gaze widening slightly as she took in the war zone of papers spread across the table. "You working on a novel?" Hope didn't look up. "Something like that." "Well," Rita muttered, pouring the coffee. "Hope the ending's worth it." Hope offered a small, sharp smile. "Oh, it will be." Then she clicked Start New Submission and began. Hope's fingers hovered over the keyboard like she was meticulously defusing a bomb, which, in a way, she truly was. The subject line stared back at her from the top of the submission form, crisp and precisely worded, urgent review of potential accounting discrepancies in contract H7A4B. Below it, she had meticulously written exactly 713 words. No more, no less. Every single sentence cut directly to the bone. No passive aggression, no emotional flourishes. Just clean, undeniable language forged from the cold steel of decades spent in compliance. Attached are 5 examples of financial inconsistencies involving vendor billing under contract H7A4B between 2022 Q2 and 2024 Q1. Each instance reflects favorable errors that disproportionately benefited the contractor. Supporting documentation includes internal memos, transaction summaries, invoice copies, and internal review logs. She attached 3 meticulously prepared PDFs, 2 carefully organized Excel sheets, and 1 high-resolution image scan of an internal email chain from Arthur Davies himself, explicitly approving an override of a previously flagged discrepancy. The cold, dismissive tone of that particular email still made her jaw clench. If Hope asks, tell her it's a system quirk. We'll make it back on the next one. She stared at the blinking cursor. Burning a bridge was one thing. This wasn't that. This was taking the bridge, meticulously dousing it in gasoline, setting it ablaze, and then deliberately mailing the smoldering ashes to the Pentagon. Her thumb hovered over the trackpad. Rita refilled her coffee again without uttering a single word. Somewhere behind her, a toddler screamed in protest over cold chicken fingers, and a man at the counter coughed with a smoker's hacking cough, as if trying to physically expel his past sins. At 11:15 a.m., she clicked send. The page went momentarily white for half a second, then refreshed to display a confirmation screen. A single, sterile line of text appeared. Thank you for your submission. Case reference number is 1183.29 QT. You may be contacted for further information. That was it. No dramatic fireworks, no sudden appearance of FBI agents bursting through the walls like a movie climax. Just a plain, unassuming bureaucratic courtesy. And yet, it hit her with the force of a freight train. Hope leaned back in the booth, her eyes stinging, adrenaline crashing hard through her system. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. Her stomach flipped violently, as if she'd swallowed a fistful of nails. She had done it, after years of politely warning them, after months of being completely ignored, after being mockingly laughed out of her job and handed a severance check as if it were a party favor. She had finally been heard. Or had she? The insidious doubts crept in quickly and parasitically. What if they simply buried it? What if no one truly cared? What if Arthur had powerful friends in high places? Good heavens, what if she had just meticulously handed over her entire professional life for absolutely nothing? Her phone buzzed. It was an email. Office of Inspector General, Case 1183-29 QT, Submission Confirmation. The government didn't operate quickly. The government certainly didn't do personal. But this email came with a second, pivotal line that shifted something tectonic deep within her chest. Your report qualifies for expedited review under 132.4 Subpart C. Hope closed her eyes and exhaled a long, shuddering breath. That wasn't just a polite thank you. That was a trigger, a spark igniting a fuse line, a silent promise that someone, somewhere, had just opened a folder, read her name, and truly understood the immense weight behind it. She looked out the diner window. The world outside hadn't changed in the slightest. The gas station across the street was still mechanically cycling through Powerball numbers. A man calmly walked a dog using one of those ridiculously oversized stroller contraptions. Life, in its stubborn normalcy, somehow kept happening. But Arthur didn't know it yet. At 11:15 a.m., the clock officially started ticking. Hope's microwave clock read 2:06 p.m. She checked it approximately 400 times. Her apartment, small, beige, and aggressively quiet, felt eerily like a padded cell. The blinds were half shut, casting the room in a dim, stagnant light. The air was thick and stale. She hadn't bothered to change out of her blazer. Her blouse was still meticulously tucked in, the top button digging uncomfortably into her neck like a constant, unwelcome reminder that her world had no immediate intention of relaxing. A cardboard box sat conspicuously on her kitchen table, like a stark coffin of her professional identity. Her cherished notebooks were spread open, their pages lined with scribbles that suddenly felt amateurish, almost desperately pathetic. She compulsively kept refreshing her email. She kept checking the federal portal. She persistently avoided calling her sister back. Her phone had buzzed 5 times already with concerned family texts. "What happened? He fired you? Are you okay? Want me to come over?" "Seriously, Hope, call me." But she didn't, because explaining it aloud would make it irrevocably real. And worse, it would create an opening for someone to tell her it wasn't truly worth it, that perhaps she had overreacted, that maybe she should have simply taken the severance and quietly moved on. She stood at the kitchen sink for no discernible reason, watching her neighbor's laundry flap listlessly in the wind like surrender flags. In her mind, Arthur was at some exclusive upscale steakhouse, clinking champagne glasses with his fawning board members, toasting to efficiency and the shrewd decision to eliminate dead weight. He was probably ordering an expensive dessert, probably derisively calling her high-strung between indulgent bites of crème brûlée. Her knee bounced nervously. Her hands ached for movement, for something to do. She attempted to read, but her mind refused to focus. She tried to clean, but only ended up compulsively reorganizing her spice rack alphabetically. At 4:12 p.m., she sank back onto the couch and stared intently at the ceiling, as if it held the answers she desperately sought. And then, at precisely 4:30 p.m., her phone rang. An unknown number, a DC area code. She answered before the second ring. "Hope Hill." "Ms. Hill, this is Aaron Wexler from the office of Judge Marston. I'm calling to confirm receipt of a submission you filed this morning through the Department of Energy OIG portal. Case number 1183 with 29 QT. Are you the author of this report?" Her voice was calm, remarkably clear, utterly devoid of emotion or preamble. "Yes," Hope said, her mouth suddenly parched. "That's me. Thank you. I'll be brief. We have received your supporting documentation and the attached compliance reports. I need to confirm 3 items before we escalate to the preliminary injunction stage. First, did you have authorized access to the internal documents you submitted?" Hope blinked. "Yes, all were accessed under my role as compliance officer." Second, have you experienced any retaliation or threats since submitting your report? Hope hesitated, just for a moment. "I was terminated this morning, officially for restructuring." There was a brief pause, the kind that wasn't silence, but the subtle sound of rapid typing. Someone was taking meticulous notes. "Understood," Aaron said. "Third, can you confirm that the documents reflect recurring discrepancies in reporting tied directly to the disbursement of federal funds under Contract 7A4B? "Yes," Hope said, her voice now much firmer. "Consistently over 2 years. I can provide further detail if needed. No need at this time. We have what we need to proceed. You'll be contacted if additional verification is necessary." Hope could faintly hear a second voice in the background, asking something legal-sounding. Aaron briefly covered the receiver, then returned. "One more thing," she said. "You may want to familiarize yourself with the term preliminary injunction. It's typically our first step in asset preservation during an active investigation." "Meaning what exactly?" "It means your report is actionable. The clock just started." The call ended abruptly before Hope could even exhale. She sat perfectly still for a moment, holding the phone as if it were radioactive. Then, without moving anything else, she reached for her laptop, opened a new tab, and Googled preliminary injunction. And when she read precisely what it meant, how it allowed a judge to summarily freeze accounts, halt business activity, and seize company records before a formal hearing, she didn't smile. She just blinked once, slowly. She knew Arthur had spent the last 4 hours basking in the arrogant belief that he had unequivocally won. But now, somewhere in Washington, D.C., someone was diligently reading the fine print. And the fine print, she realized, had very sharp teeth. At 5:15 p.m., Hope was still staring intently at her laptop, the definition of preliminary injunction glowing on the screen like an unfolding prophecy. She hadn't moved in 20 minutes. The room felt eerily vacuum-sealed, time suspended somewhere between the sterile language of legal definitions and her profound sense of disbelief. And then her phone buzzed. It was Olivia, timid Olivia from accounting, the one who always meticulously brought gluten-free cookies to potlucks that no one ever touched. The one who once quietly whispered, "I'm so sorry," when Hope had been verbally reprimanded in a staff meeting for flagging too many issues. The text read, "OMG. Hope, what did you do?" Hope blinked. A second text dropped in before she could even formulate a response. "The feds are here! They're changing the locks on Arthur's office!" She froze. Then came the third one. An image. Blurry, crooked, clearly taken from the far end of the hallway, as if Olivia had been crouching discreetly behind the break room curtain. 2 individuals stood outside the executive suite. Black suits, clipboards, no smiles. One held a sleek black leather case. The other was talking intently to HR. And there, in the background, unmistakable in its faux mahogany glory, was the closed double-door entrance to Arthur's self-proclaimed kingdom. Hope's breath caught sharply in her throat. Her first thought wasn't triumph. It was, "Oh God, it's real." She stared at the image as if it were a terrifying painting of the Last Judgment. No more hypotheticals. No more intricate mental chess games. This wasn't just a frozen asset order. This was physical boots on corporate carpet. This was real people in real suits with real authority, physically changing real locks. Another ping. They escorted Brenda out of finance. She's crying. Someone's digging through the expense reports folder right now. People are freaking the hell out. Hope gripped the edge of her table to steady herself. Her palms were damp. Her heart pounded relentlessly, as if it desperately wanted to escape her chest. "Arthur?" she typed, 3 dots pulsing. Then, "He's not here. Left after lunch. Probably still doesn't know. But everyone else does." Hope stood up from the couch, adrenaline roaring through her veins so fast her knees wobbled precariously. She paced her living room like a caged animal. Her brain fired in every conceivable direction. What exactly are they looking at? Are they meticulously going through her old reports? Are they pulling surveillance footage? Her phone rang again. She checked the news, local Twitter accounts, even Reddit. Nothing. Not yet. It was happening incredibly fast. Too fast for the press to catch on, which meant it was strategic, silent, contained for now. Olivia's next text was quieter, like a hushed whisper on the page. "Hope. It's bad. They brought boxes. Like seizure boxes. That image, the federal agents bringing large cardboard boxes into the hallowed executive suite, hit Hope harder than she had anticipated. She pictured her old office, her quiet cubicle of spreadsheets and ethics, sitting just down the hall from Arthur's opulent glass-walled palace. She imagined those boxes slowly filling up with the Empire's dirty laundry. And suddenly, the memory of his laughter, that warm, dismissive, cruel sound, played in her mind again. But now, it sounded distant, smaller, like it was echoing from the very bottom of a deep, dark well. Hope sat down slowly. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, momentarily unsure what to do next. She didn't need to do anything. The machinery of justice was inexorably moving, and somewhere in that bustling office, in the swirling vortex of panic and confiscated hard drives, someone was undoubtedly asking the precise question Arthur never in his wildest dreams thought he'd hear. Who is Hope Hill? They were about to find out. At 6:03 p.m., Hope's inbox chimed with a new message. Sender, encrypted notice at District Court, OIG. Subject, court order, civil injunction notice, ref 1183-29 QT. She stared at it for a few seconds, her heart thumping like it had suddenly grown its own powerful engine. The email header wasn't dramatic. No jarring red stamps, no bold, aggressive fonts, just plain black text on a stark white screen. Cold, surgical, undeniably real. She clicked it open. The body of the email was remarkably brief. 3 simple lines of bureaucratic courtesy, thanking her for her cooperation and confirming that she was formally listed as the originating party in a sealed matter under active review. Attached was one PDF, encrypted and password protected. Her access code was the last 4 digits of her Social Security number, plus the month and year of her submission. She entered it with trembling fingers. The document opened, and there it was. United States District Court, Emergency Injunction, Civil Case Num. 1183, 2009 QT. Her eyes scanned the first paragraph, then again. Then a third time, much slower, as if reading it meticulously would somehow make its permanence even more undeniable. Based on credible evidence of significant and systematic reporting irregularities related to Federal Contract 7A4B, the court hereby issues an emergency injunction against Respondent Arthur Davies, CEO of Convergent Solutions, to freeze all business and personal assets pending evidentiary review. She felt it like a physical punch, not painful, but utterly seismic. Every single word landed like a precise gavel strike. Credible evidence. Systematic reporting irregularities. Freeze all assets. Her gaze finally caught on his name. Arthur Davies. Right there, clearly stated under respondent. Plain black text. No swagger, no expensive suit. Just ink and irrefutable accountability. Further down, the language became even sharper. Respondent is to appear before the court within 48 hours to provide a detailed explanation of financial methodologies employed under said contract. Failure to comply will result in escalated enforcement. Hope read it twice, then a third time. She leaned back in her chair, her arms slack at her sides, and simply stared at the glowing screen. This was it. This was the precise moment the world acknowledged what she'd been shouting into the void for years. It didn't arrive with applause. It didn't come with confetti or exuberant cheering, or even a simple thank you note. It arrived in a 14-page court order, replete with dense footnotes and precise citations. And it was absolutely perfect. The justice wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet. It was powerful. It was the kind of justice that doesn't need to yell because it carries a federal seal and the terrifying, unspoken threat of prison time. Hope let out a breath she hadn't even realized she'd been holding. For the first time all day, she allowed herself the profound relief of closing her eyes. The laughter, his laughter, was gone, completely replaced by silence. Glorious, humming silence. She opened her eyes again and scrolled back to the very top of the document. Her cursor hovered, then clicked print. Because this wasn't just evidence, this was a trophy. At 6:42 p.m., Hope's phone buzzed once. Olivia. He knows it was you. They just escorted him out of the building. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Hope stared at the text, utterly motionless. She read it again, slower. She pictured it vividly. Arthur, in his impeccably tailored blazer and ridiculously overpriced loafers, watching two federal agents calmly walk into his office with clipboards and lockboxes, watching his coveted nameplate disappear from the door that he'd once boomed through like a sitcom dad. Watching the very empire he had meticulously built on smirks and shortcuts collapse in real time before his disbelieving eyes. She imagined the exact, agonizing moment it finally hit him. That the very numbers Hope had diligently flagged, the ones he had so contemptuously dismissed as nitpicking, were, in fact, the final, unforgiving nails in his corporate coffin. That the quiet woman with the moleskin notebook wasn't just an overpaid rule follower. She was the literal, unyielding reaper. Hope glanced at her screen. The court order still glowed on her laptop, each line a solemn hymn in the gospel of vindication. She leaned back in her chair, the entire room finally exhaling with her. The gentle buzz of the fridge, the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, the world outside remained stubbornly unchanged. But she was different. 6 hours ago, he had laughed, loud, confident, utterly careless. Now that laugh was just a distant memory, thin, shriveled, utterly meaningless, like a deflating balloon in a desolate funeral home. She stood, walked to the cabinet above her fridge, and carefully pulled down a dusty, foil-topped bottle of celebratory sparkling cider she'd been saving for something good. She hadn't known precisely what that something good meant at the time. A new job, a birthday, a weekend without guilt. This, she realized, was infinitely better. She popped the cork. It sounded precisely like freedom. No grand toast to absent friends, no elaborate speech. Just her, alone in her small kitchen, glass firmly in hand, watching the digital guillotine fall from 200 miles away. She lifted the glass. "To the fine print," she said quietly. "And to the fools who never bothered to read it." Then she sipped, and she smiled. This story powerfully illustrates that integrity, meticulousness, and courage are formidable forces against arrogance and corruption. Hope's journey teaches us that even when faced with overwhelming power and dismissal, staying true to your ethical compass and systematically documenting the truth can lead to profound justice. The positive message is clear. Never underestimate the quiet strength of your own convictions. Your attention to detail, your commitment to what is right, and your refusal to be silenced can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of dishonesty. In a world that often rewards outward bravado, true power lies in your ability to uncover and uphold the truth, turning moments of injustice into opportunities for significant change and vindication. Your meticulous efforts, even when unseen, can ignite a chain of events that brings accountability to those who believe they are above the rules.